On that note...
On that note, Dave, the main topic.
The main topic. So, Rob, over the last 3 or 4 years, we've done a lot of mix and matching with our TARDIS crews. We've put classic crews into new Who, we've put new Who crews into old Who, we've put crews into movies, we've put crews into TV shows, and it got me thinking, well, the one thing we haven't done is said which crew has to go in a particular story.
Yeah, and I found this surprisingly hard. Out of all the iterations we've played of this sort of game, Dave, I found this the hardest in the sense that with a lot of stories, I'd be like, okay, I think I'm onto a winner. Can I see Bill Hartnell in this? No. Can I see Pat in this? No. John? No. Oh, this is great. Tom? No. But then I'd get to a ladder doctor and I'd be like, oh, bugger, I can imagine Sylve doing this. Or whatever, I'd think of some modern tale and how it felt unique, and then I'd be like, oh no, damn, I can picture Pat doing this probably. So yeah, I had to really think, and even then I could maybe still picture some other Doctor in some of these choices, because the Doctor is at the end of the day the Doctor. It is very hard to make a list like this. I have made a list, I'm pretty happy with it, but it was a hard thing to do, Dave.
Yeah, look, I feel the same. I mean, I sort of threw this out as a topic and we mulled it over and gone, yeah, can it work? Yeah, okay, yeah, we can make this work. And we put it on the schedule for July. And you're right. When you sort of sit down and get to it, you go, this is tough. This is, and I think because of that, it's been a really interesting experiment to do. I mean, Terrence Dicks always said, you just write the Doctor and then let the performer put the character over the top. And there's a certain extent to which I think we're finding that is true, but sometimes you just get things all lining up in such a way that you go, this could only happen here and now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and I do have some of those big time where I'm absolutely happy with my reasoning. Absolutely.
Yes. Now, so we went through and we made the list. I must admit, as I was working through all the Doctors, I did feel a bit like Grandpa Simpson and wanted to sort of, write a letter and go, Dear BBC, there are now too many Doctors. Please lose 3.
Fair.
But I did get there. Do you reckon we'll have snaps with this one, Rob? 1 per era?
I don't think we'll have 1 per era, but snaps that is. But I think we'll have snaps because when I was making these, some of them just seem so obvious to me. I'm thinking, how can Dave not pick this?
All right, I've just ticked 2 on my list. I think we'll snap on.
Okay, I have eyeballed 2. I've got it up on a computer screen, so I can't do much more with it. So I've eyeballed 2. Okay.
Fair enough. So look, following the policy we've had at the Doctor Who show over the last year, where we do these lists, we are going to do the eras in random order. I have a little bowl of Rassilon, I guess you could call it.
Yes.
To match the hat of Rassilon, and we will go through in random order just to mix it up a bit. We don't always want to start with Hartnell.
No.
And the first one I'm going to start with, Rob, do you want to kick us off with the Jodie Whittaker story that could only have Jodie Whittaker?
Oh, crikey. Okay. Jodie Whittaker. I've gone here, Dave, with the Timeless Children. Now, listeners may know my thoughts on this story, and that's what colours it as a very Jodie, or should I say a very Chibnall era sort of story. Whereas I see other modern showrunners adding bits and pieces to the lore. Think of even something like The Hybrid from Hellbent. RTD and Moffat never went full-blown, let's rewrite the core of a character, let's do it cack-handedly and not even have a payoff. So, based on everything we know of Doctor Who from Hartnell through to the Whittaker era so far, I think this story could have only come from the Whittaker/Chibnall era myself, and so I'm going with the Timeless Children for that reason.
Interesting. I've got a bit different. I picked Spyfall.
Oh, okay.
And there are a couple of reasons why I felt this was the right one to do. Part of it is that this is a story that really is structured around the whole Jodie Whittaker fam. And I think that all the different characters in that TARDIS crew all interact with that story in a particular way, so it needs to be them. I also think that the way the Doctor operates in this one is very, very Jodie, and I think it has been particularly written for Jodie to look the way she does, to act the way she does, and I think that really stood out for me. But also, this is where we get the first appearance of the Sacha Dhawan Master, and I think only Jodie can go against that Master in that way. I think, like a lot of Masters, they're written for their Doctors, and this, I think, is particular. Dhawan and Whittaker are really strong together. So, for a number of reasons, I went with Spyfall.
Okay, listeners, start making notes. See who you agree with more as we go through all of these.
Oh, yes, please do. Hope it's me. I will lead us off on one of the easier ones that I had to pick, and that was Davo.
Right, yeah.
And I've gone with Black Orchid because he plays cricket. And look, I was being a little bit facetious there, but I think there are other reasons. I think it is a very 80s production. I think the way that the TARDIS crew works in that story is very, very Davison era. I think that the way that the Fifth Doctor is sort of carried through events is very, very Davo, but he plays cricket for about 47 minutes of the story, so it can only be Davo.
Fair enough, Dave, fair enough.
Now, I thought that was going to be a snap, was I right?
No, still no snaps.
Okay.
Dave, I've gone with Frontios. Now, you probably thought I was going to pick Kinder, because I love talking about Kinder, but no. I think Christopher H. Bidmead's stories have a definite flavour. And as 2 of his 3 stories are Davo stories, and the other one introduces Davo, I instantly get the vibe that he writes Davo stories. And I try and put other Doctors into this, and it's hard, even from having the point of view of a companion who would react to the Tractators in the same way. The closest era to this is Colin's, and I just don't see Colin in this at all. So the more I thought about it, the more Frontios felt very Davo era to me.
It's certainly one of his best performances.
Yeah, I know you like it.
I do like it. So I always like to talk about Frontios. Nice one.
Thank you.
Next out of the hat, Rob, please keep going with Sylvester McCoy.
Sylvester McCoy. Here's where we may get a snap. I've gone with Survival. And I've gone with Survival here because it's the bridge between eras. On one hand, it's classic Doctor Who, yes, but it's pushing the boat out so far. Do you see Colin in this? Do you see John in this? Or Tom? Nah. On the flip side of the coin, though, although it's doing things that New Who will do, you know, being very urban and all of that sort of stuff, it's still a quaint sort of TV that the modern era just doesn't do, as TV has evolved, and evolved several times since this was made. So it sits between 2 worlds with elements of both in it, but not enough for other classic teams, eras to be messing with it, and not enough for the modern era to really step into it. So Survival for me, Dave.
It's not a snap, but we did have similar thinking because I've gone with The Curse of Fenrik.
Okay.
I cannot imagine another Doctor filling in this story. This is all about evil from the dawn of time, and that's a very McCoy thing.
Yes.
The treatment of the Doctor's companion is a very McCoy thing. In fact, the way that the Doctor's companion Ace acts in this is a very Ace thing. This really, I think, could only be done with Ace. The way that the Doctor works his way through that narrative, that McCoy Dark Doctor thing, is very, very explicit to him, and very explicit to him and Sophie Aldred as Ace. So I just thought that was a really clear pick, but I can totally see where you're coming from with Survival as well. I really can.
Thank you.
I will keep us going with Peter Capaldi.
Ooh.
This was a tough one because you realise as you go through this process, or at least I certainly did, how much Peter Capaldi really did pull from other Doctors. He pulled a lot from Tom. He pulled a bit from Pertwee and some from others. So it was tough, but I went in the end with Listen.
Okay.
Because that is a story that needs Peter Capaldi to be in there. It needs that older Doctor. And I don't mean older just in terms of Capaldi, the actor, being older, although that is part of it, but older in terms of the Doctor himself being a long way through his lifespan. You couldn't have an early Doctor do that Listen concept, particularly when you start to reminisce about the Doctor's childhood. The way that the Doctor is excited by mystery, is going off in crazy tangents, is looking and exploring, is just totally Capaldi. And the interaction of Clara with him, I think, is also very, very particular. That story sits there for me as the epitome of the Capaldi era, and I think that only Capaldi could deliver that script.
Okay. I'm hearing you on FM there, Dave. But it's not a snap.
Not a snap.
Not a snap. This was maybe one of the easiest ones for me on the list.
Ooh.
And I've gone with Hell Bent. Now, I just don't see this as a classic story. I don't see this playing out in the classic era at all. So of the modern Doctors, which of them could have gone down to Gallifrey and had a shouting match with Rassilon, shoot a Time Lord General, and all of that stuff? I mean, Eccleston is a hard man on the outside, and he might have the front to show up. But I think he's shown to be a lot softer than he really appears in some stories, and I don't think he'd go through with a lot of this. Whereas I think Capaldi is a genuinely angry man. You know, the rebel Time Lord, as he liked to put it when he got the role. He was like, I'm going to play this as the rebel Time Lord. And I think we see that here. I think this is a super Capaldi story. I don't see any other Doctor doing what he does in this story.
No, I get that.
Yeah?
Yeah, I totally get that.
Very different angle to you.
It is. It is. And you know, Capaldi is a very interesting Doctor. There's a lot to him. And I think it's interesting that you found it easy and I found him really hard.
Yeah. This one just stood out to me, jumped off the page.
Yeah, fair enough. The next Doctor is the second, Patrick Troughton, Rob.
Gosh, Pat. I'm going here with Tomb of the Cybermen. And I'll say, given what we were just talking about, this was my hardest pick of the lot. Genuinely, that was the last one I made on the list. Because so much of Pat's era I could see other Doctors in. I'd look at each and every story and think, oh no, I can see this Doctor in this and that Doctor in that, you know. But here, it feels very out of place for Hartnell. Maybe because I don't think of Hartnell as a Cyberman kind of Doctor. You know, they only just come in as he's going out the door.
Yeah.
The Pert, I don't see here at all. Not just because he doesn't get any Cyberman stories. Just in general, I don't see Pertwee in this. Tom, at a pinch, I could maybe make an argument for, but maybe not. Davo, no. Colin actually gets into some cyber tombs in his era, and it's nothing like this. McCoy, no. And then into the modern Doctors, and I don't see it being done in the same way. So, yes, as well as thinking of the problematic stuff that is in this story as well, and you think, well, maybe that could only happen in the 60s, I just don't see any other era doing this. So, to me, this is firmly rooted in 1967, Tomb of the Cybermen for Pat.
I went with the Seeds of Death.
Really?
And I did this because, like you, I struggled with the Troughton era. There is a lot of Troughton stories that you could put another TARDIS crew in and it's them fighting Daleks, it's them fighting Cybermen. And you look, other Doctors have fought the Ice Warriors, but this feels very much like Troughton and his era. It's a story that could really only have been made at the time that man was about to land on the moon. It really feels like 1969 and the Troughton era. The way that the crew interacts with each other, Jamie and Zoe, I think is very particular. I think you need Zoe here to really drive a large part of the plot, particularly at the back end where she's quite instrumental in working things out. Mm-hmm. You need Jamie there to fight the Ice Warriors, but also this is a story that's really about the second Doctor running up and down corridors on the moon, which is a very Troughton thing. And it's also the story where the Doctor goes around gunning down Ice Warriors, which is a very Troughton thing. Yeah. He was not afraid to, get out there and mow down a few Ice Warriors when the time came, which other Doctors really don't do. So for a number of reasons, both vibe and plot and setting, I thought this was the Troughton pick, but yes, it was hard, and I'll be honest, I'm not entirely happy even with this as my pick.
Because do you think, well, the Doctor with a smart companion, how about Tom, not afraid to go the knuckle or shoot people, with Romana in this?
Yeah, look, I can't imagine Tom piloting a rocket.
Fair enough.
I think just sitting in a rocket for a couple of days that goes to the moon, I can't see him doing. Pertwee flew in a rocket, but
he pilots that little flying car when he does the bye-bye.
Yeah, and you see, and that's just the wrong vibe.
Okay.
It's just the wrong vibe, because this is all about that whole thing where people are watching television for hours and seeing man landing on the moon and going, wow, it actually takes a long time to go to the moon.
Yeah.
And they're really sort of emulating that. So look, I think both of us struggled with Troughton, which is interesting in itself.
Yeah, well, look, the Tom and Romana thing is the closest I could put into Seeds of Death, and as we've just discussed, it probably doesn't work. So, it's probably a good pick.
Yeah. Look, I'm content with it.
Very good.
I'm very content with my pick for our next Doctor, which is Colin.
Colin, yes.
I've gone Vengeance on Varos.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is that 80s nasty, violent sort of story that I love.
Yeah.
I really enjoy it. But you can't imagine another story that would have somebody accidentally falling in a pool of acid. Yeah. I can't imagine another story where the Doctor just, traps somebody in a whole bunch of deadly vines, or where his companion gets transmuted into a bird, and just lots of things happen. That is very particular of Colin's Doctor, very particular of Colin's era, and I just can't imagine any other Doctor being put into the punishment dome on Varos. And that's fine. That's what Colin's era was about. It's its own thing. I think it's a great story, but it's Colin.
Snap!
There you go.
One of my two eyeballs has just come up. Vengeance on Varos for me too.
Well picked.
Yeah, with its background in video nasties and the public reacting to snuff movies and things like that, this feels a very 80s concept, but I can't see Davo in it at all. Sylve might go close, but it does feel so rooted in Colin's era and using Colin's Doctor, even though Colin's era is like this little, 2-3 year thing. I would find it very hard to see Jodie in this. I find it very hard to see Hartnell in this, I almost went for Revelation in this spot instead, and I think I can make a really good argument for Revelation too. But in the end, Vengeance on Varos, a super duper Colin Baker story that I just can't see others in. So, snap!
There you go. Oh, look, that was one that very quickly stood out for me, so not surprised you snapped there.
Yeah.
Although I can see where Revelation would fit in as well. That's not a shock. Mm-hmm. Matt Smith, Rob.
Smithy, I've gone here with The 11th Hour. And here we're into the Moffat era. And his stories do feel so very different to the RTD era. I mean, I acknowledge Moffat wrote in the RTD era, but when we get to the Moffat era proper, his Doctor Who feels very different to what had gone before. And I think when everyone talks about the fairy tale feel that he suddenly brought into New Who, into modern Who, I don't see it being something that Tennant or Eccleston could have done in their modern eras. Conversely, I don't think it's something that Capaldi could have stepped into comfortably and done this fairy tale kind of vibe. Maybe Jodie with the children's television presenter persona that I often joke about, but then I think the whole thing would have felt quite different. So in terms of really doing justice to the story of the 11th Hour, I think it's very much a Smithy thing. It's a Smithy original. I couldn't go past this one. 11th Hour for Smith.
Look, I didn't go with the 11th Hour. I did have a couple of options with Smith. I almost went with Dinosaurs on a Spaceship, but in the end decided on The Girl Who Waited. And the reason that won over the other nominees for Smith is because all of the TARDIS crew from that story really have to be there to make that story work. This is a story about a very particular, I would say in some ways quite toxic relationship between the Doctor and Rory and Amy, and I think you only get that in the Moffat era, and you only get that in the Smith era, and you particularly get it in this story. You can't translate, even as difficult sometimes as the Fifth Doctor and Adric and Nyssa were, or Tegan as well. Even as difficult as they were, they never quite reached the levels of toxicity that I really see in that relationship at that point in the story. So I just couldn't take anybody out there. It is a very Moffat story. It's all about the timey-wimey. It's all about the tragedy. It's all about the feels and the Murray Gold score. It's just so particular of what it does, and it needs those characters to do what it wants to do. So The Girl Who Waited for me.
Yeah, I while you were talking, I was trying to think of other times in Doctor Who there's been not even necessarily a love triangle, but a triangle of sorts between the leads. And I'm thinking in recent history, maybe Eccleston and Barrowman with Billy Piper. They're both trying to impress Rose. But then going back beyond that, has it ever really happened? I'm thinking, Harry Sullivan and Sarah Jane got along. Did the Doctor sort of interfere with that? No, not really. Bill Hartnell with Ian and Barbara. No. So I can't even see that dynamic in other eras, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it's very, very particular of that era, Doctor, season, TARDIS crew. It's very, very particular.
Yeah, agree. Good one.
John Pertwee.
John Pertwee.
I have picked The Green Death.
Okay.
And look, if you said to Chat GPT, write me a Third Doctor story, it would write The Green Death.
Ooh, I'm going to disagree with that in the moment, but go on.
Okay. Look, I think that this is a story that's all about the Third Doctor's era and his companions and his entourage. It's got the ecological message in there that's very particular of his era. It's got Pertwee shouting at miners. It's got Pertwee. Exploring things and doing scientific experiments, and he's mixing chemicals and he's playing with test tubes.
Yes.
It's got Joe Grant being Joe Grant. It's got the Brigadier, a really good performance of the Brigadier. It's got Mike Yates doing a very particular thing. It's just all these things that I think of the Third Doctor doing. He does them in here. He has a Venusian Aikido fight at least a couple of times. He gets to argue with a computer. Just, all these little things you might say, well, a different Doctor did that one particular thing. But Pertwee did them all.
Yeah.
And this to me is just so much the epitome of the Pertwee era.
Okay, well, let's see what I've picked. Because, Dave, I've gone with the Demons. And I'm running with this story because of the unit family vibe that's present. And I know it's not the only Pertwee unit story by a long shot, but I think this is peak unit family. And when I think of other Doctors and unit, Pat, his relationship with unit wasn't like this. Tom, unit was a spent force when he came in. Sylve, I don't see it. Battlefield's more of just a Brigadier piece and unit's a backdrop. And the others who didn't do unit stories, I find it even harder to see. So I think the Demons is not only peak unit family, but peak Pertwee, more so than the Green Death. And for that reason, we're on the same ticket here that we're looking at what we regard as peak Pertwee. But for me, it's the Demons.
Yeah, look, I can't argue with that. I think that the Green Death, to defend my corner for a moment, ticks that extra box by having that very particular ecology theme through it.
That's fair.
So that to me does tick another box. But look, you're right.
I've got the Master.
You've got the Master, which is, again, that's a really good point. Look, you're right. I mean, they both have Pertwee arriving on a location and shouting at people. They both have Pertwee having a fight. They both have Pertwee doing the whole science, Miss Grant. So, they are ticking very particular Pertwee boxes. And look, I love both those stories, so I'm not upset by that pick at all.
Yeah, we have different picks, but we're on the same road here.
Yeah, we absolutely are. Keep us on the road, or divert if you wish, Rob, with William Hartnell.
William Hartnell. Dave, I've gone here with the Reign of Terror. My Hartnell pick had to be an historical, as they're so rare outside of Bill's era. Only Pat and Davo have pure historicals, and not many. And of Bill's historicals, which is the most straightforward? I don't think I could pick comedy like the Romans. That's too much like fun. That's too much what modern Doctor Who would do if it gave a pure historical a go. I think to keep the audience interested, they'd probably do a comedy. So I think it's this one. It's barely even Doctor Who in some ways. It's super historical, very linear. I find it very, very hard to see other eras doing the Reign of Terror.
Fair enough.
No snap? I thought I was going to hear a snap there.
No snap. In fact, I did think very hard about the historicals. And you're right, I did rule out the sort of the Donald Cotton sort of comedy historicals for the same reason you did. I could see a number of modern Doctors doing that. And look, I could put, a McCoy into the Aztecs. I could put other Doctors into Marco Polo. But what I can't see another TARDIS crew dropping into is the Web Planet.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Because this is a story that starts off with that real Hartnell thing of arriving on a very alien planet and taking time to really explore this alien planet. And that's very, very Hartnell. But you also have the way that Ian interacts there. You have the way that Barbara goes off and interacts there and works with the Monoptry. You have Vicky and the like, so it works for them. But the thing that really sold it for me is that infamous thing about the web planet having no human characters or anything even resembling a human character. And you can rule all the modern Doctors out from that straight away, because there's no way that a Russell T Davies or a Moffat would go, I'm going to have a story with no relatable human characters whatsoever. It just wouldn't be done. I couldn't see the other Doctors doing that. I just thought the web planet is so Hartnell era. It could only be done in that era, and it just seemed an obvious pick for me.
Very nice. Very well reasoned too.
Another that I had trouble with has just come out of the hat, Rob, and that is David Tennant.
Okay. Because
there are some things about the Tennant era that are very particular to it, but he's kind of generic Doctor. He's kind of generic era. He just goes around doing doctory things. And
that's why he's so popular.
And that's probably why he is so popular, yes.
Yeah.
And indeed, the Doctor I had the most trouble with still hasn't come out yet and is also very popular, so you can probably work out who it is.
Yes.
In the end, I went for Doomsday.
Okay.
And that's because of the whole 10th Doctor Rose thing. I just can't see another Doctor quite being as explicit in wanting to shag their companion as the Doctor is here in Doomsday. I can't see another Doctor doing the whole, I destroyed a star so I could say goodbye. Jesus, God, it's terrible. I just can't see another Doctor doing that. So for that particular reason, that was the bit of Tennant I latched on to go, only he could do Doomsday.
That's interesting, because I almost did Tooth and Claw for the same reason.
Right.
But I didn't. I went with the Doctor's daughter, because conceptually, I don't see this flying in the classic era at all. I don't think they would have brought this sort of concept in at all in the classic era. So that just wipes all those guys out in one hit. And in the modern era, I don't see Chris reacting the same way to Jenny. Would Smith? No, probably a bit off. Capaldi would be weird towards the idea, I think, especially the Capaldi of his first two seasons. And Jodie, I think it'd just be odd. So maybe it's also the chemistry that Georgia had with Dave, which then, kicked on in real life and they got married. But the performance and the vibe here does just feel so very 10th Doctor era to me. I couldn't go past the Doctor's daughter.
Yeah, I get that. It's not one that occurred to me when I was thinking of my short list, but now you say it is kind of the web planet of the Tennant era, in that it's just so particular of that era. You're right, I could only see it being done in that era.
Yeah.
From one incredibly popular Doctor to another.
Yes.
I struggled with this one. Rob, Tom Baker, of course. How did you find him? Where did you go?
Well, I'll say when we were making these lists over the last week or so, friend of the show, Mike Solko, wrote to us on Facebook and gave us a few suggestions, and his Tom was City of Death. And for a period, I was really mulling that over and thinking, oh, City of Death, I think that could be a winner. But in the end, I've gone with Sharda.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Because with Tom, I could imagine a lot of stories that most other eras couldn't do, but then one would pop up. I think this one, however, with Douglas Adams writing, with the 70s vibe, it's too much for Bill, Pat, John. By the time Davo comes along, I don't think it feels right. And that just increases as we get to Cole and Sylve. Ironically, I know it's been done with McGann as an audio, but what I find is that is a very bizarre and jarring piece, which perhaps proves this point to myself at the very least, that Sharda is a very Tom story. I just can't see it any other way.
That's a really good pick. Look, I could see Peter Capaldi in City of Death.
Okay.
And very easily, I think, but I can't see him in Sharda. So yeah, I think you're right. I went in a very different direction with this one.
Okay.
Having really struggled with Tom, I went with the Seeds of Doom.
Right.
And that is because I think the Seeds of Doom, which is my favourite Tom story, it's in my top 5 Doctor Who stories ever. I love it.
Yes.
But it is the kind of height of the Tom Baker, Liz Sladen, Philip Hinchcliffe, Robert Holmes combination, such that there's never anything quite like it ever again. The way the Doctor's acts in that really particularly whimsical and bizarre way is there. But then twisting on a dime to be violent, punching out a chauffeur, doing all that sort of thing, running around with a handgun. The way that Liz Sladen and Sarah Jane is treated in here, being held down, I must see what happens when a critter touches human flesh. I can't see that moment in any other era of the show. I really just can't. I can't see people being thrown into a mulching machine in any other season of the show but this one.
What about season 22?
Even season 22, it's silly violence. There's an edge to this one. Yeah. There's a real edge to this one that I think only Tom Baker can get away with. And so for me, that's why I picked it.
You don't think Capaldi?
I can't see Capaldi running around with a handgun and shooting chauffeurs.
Okay.
Or punching chauffeurs, I should say. But yeah, no, I can't. So, that was tough because I think Tom is the every Doctor.
Yeah, true.
So it is tough. That leaves us with one more, Rob.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, of course, the wonderful Christopher Eccleston.
Yes, because we're not doing Paul McGann. We should have told the listeners that up front.
No, because I think we could both sit here and tell people why we'll do the TV movie. That wouldn't be very exciting or surprising. Look, Christopher Eccleston, I've picked Father's Day.
Okay.
And I've picked it because of the tone of the story. That story to work needs to have a very funereal tone over the top of it. And that, to me, really means it has to be the Ninth Doctor and it has to be Rose. It's tugging on the heartstrings, but not in the way that the Tennant era would do, not in the way that the Smith era would do, in that very melancholic way that I could only imagine Eccleston doing. Yes, I could imagine somebody like a McCoy doing part of it with that sort of very sad aspect to it, but McCoy wouldn't have the relationship with his companion that's necessary to pull it off.
Mm.
So I think it does all come together, script, tone, character, to be Father's Day for me.
Okay.
Did we get a final snap, Rob?
No, we didn't.
No, we didn't.
Because, Dave, I've gone with Dalek.
Oh, I came so close to that.
Really? Okay,
Yes.
We'll see if your logic was the same. Because it's interesting when we get to the Eccleston era. Not only are there not many to pick from,
Yes.
but I was thinking, gosh, so many of these stories could be Tennant stories. I can see Tennant doing that with Billy. I can see Tennant doing that. Oh, yeah, I see Tennant doing that. And then the light bulb went above my head. Oh, of course, because RTD has such a strong influence on Series 1 stories, Series 2 stories, Series 3 stories, etc. His era is just flavoured that way. So, of course, there's going to be similarities. So, I've gone with a non-RTD story from Eccleston's era, and I think this is the one where the reactions to the Dalek and such wouldn't feel right with Tennant. I think it's too modern for the classic Doctors to be in. And even though Smith has a similar reaction to the Dalek in Victory of the Daleks when he sees the Dalek, I think he'd still feel off in it as well. So I went with Dalek.
Yeah, I think that's all very fair. As you were saying it, I was thinking, I could imagine Tom or Capaldi doing some of the confrontation with the Dalek, but the whole back half stuff, no, definitely not.
I mean, Eccleston really goes off his head at the Dalek, and I know Capaldi can be shouty, I know Tom can be shouty, but could they go there? I mean, he's almost like like a soccer hooligan or something, the way he's getting up in its eye stalk and eyeballing it literally. And yelling at it, and he just wants to kill it, and of course the twist is that he doesn't, because he's a coward, as he calls himself, But,
it is a truly amazing performance, isn't it?
Yeah, really good stuff.
Well, there you go. At the end of all of that, we only had the one snap, Vengeance on Varos for Colin, which, look, I don't think that's particularly controversial.
No.
Any takeaways you had from this process, Rob?
Just the one I had at the start, which is that it was very hard in the end, because you can see the Doctor as a through line through all these eras, which is just marvellous. From 1963 onwards, from the old series to the new series, there is this core that is the Doctor that you still see, even when the persona changes remarkably, even when the story writers change remarkably. You can still often put other Doctors into stories. It's much harder to say the stories that they couldn't be in. So this was hard.
Yeah, look, I found it harder than I expected as well. I think that those Doctors who are the most popular and the most well-known, and in some ways very generic, were the particularly hard ones to do. But yeah, it's been really, really fascinating to try and do it. But as you say, you look at each of these options and you can see other Doctors reflected in each of them. And I mean, I'm now sort of sitting here thinking, if I had to put Jodie Whittaker into a story from each era, could I do it? And I think I could. It would be tough in a couple of eras, but I think I could.
Yeah, same.
Excellent. Well, look, that's been our topic for this month. Please, as always, write in. Let us know what you thought of our topics. Did you agree more with me, more with Rob? Did you have your own suggestions? Did we miss something obvious? Please write in, tweet us, and let us know.